Some people will say anxious people require too much reassurance, and ultimately they're the ones that are to blame if a relationship fails. Or others will say that avoidant people just are incapable of love, and they ultimately want to be independent, and so it's unfair of them to date knowing that.
Josh, is it me or is everyone obsessed with attachment theory right now?
Yeah, I think I am too, I'm not gonna lie.
What have you been seeing about it online?
So I've seen videos which kind of promise to like decode relationships of mine that haven't worked, and why they haven't worked, and they've been quite eye-opening, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I've been seeing all these online quizzes, and I actually took one, and I found out that I have a secure attachment style, which technically means that I am comfy in relationships and also can be independent. Of course, they're not medically binding, but I do quite enjoy doing them. And I'm seeing all of these things on TikTok. Relationship coaches, influencers talking about attachment styles. So we're going to get into this, right? What is attachment theory? Where does it come from?
So it's a pretty fundamental idea in psychology. It basically describes the way we create connections with other people in our lives. And it starts with a simple fact. As babies, we rely on other people to feed us, to care for us and protect us. Unlike many other animals, we rely on people until years after birth. And it's these relationships that we form with people which then later shape the way we create our own relationships with other people later in our lives. And so if a parent is supportive, if they are emotionally available and they're predictable, we learn to trust people. And that then influences the way we trust other people in our lives. But if they're unpredictable, they're emotionally distant, or they're frightening, then unfortunately that creates sort of coping strategies that we take forward into the rest of our lives that we use in our relationships.
So scary, the thought of being a parent, that much responsibility, not just for your child's well-being, but also their future attachment style.
Yeah, so the theory was developed looking at the relationships between parents and children. It was first developed by the British psychiatrist John Bowlby in the 1950s, and it was later expanded on by the American-Canadian psychologist Mary Ainsworth. And it's taken on a new life.
It has indeed, it's everywhere. So I saw when I was doing this quiz that there are 4 different types of attachment styles. Can you talk me through them, please?
Yes, I've got some notes here. So in simple terms, anxious attachment is associated with people who worry about rejection or being abandoned in a relationship because they just feel like the relationship, just their partner or their friend just isn't truly going to be there for them, and they're going to abandon them. People with avoidant attachment prioritize their independence, and they find it difficult to open up emotionally and to trust other people. And they may subconsciously view getting close with someone as a threat to that independence, and so they prefer to be alone. Those with fearful avoidant attachment want close relationships, but they just struggle to feel safe in them, and they may seek connection one moment and then withdraw the next, and so it can be quite confusing for their partner. And someone who is secure is comfortable with both closeness and independence in relationships.
I've come across attachment theory and talked about it quite a lot, like with friends and stuff, and often I found that you might have one attachment style, but the person that you're with makes you feel different. Like if I'm with someone who is making me chase after them, I might feel quite anxious. Or if I'm with someone who is chasing after me, I might become a little bit avoidant. So it's trying to find that sweet spot where you both feel quite safe in a relationship. And we've actually been hearing from a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist with a bit more about this. So here's Dr. Amir Levine.
I came across it because I did a residency in psychiatry and then in child psychiatry. I was going through a breakup myself at the time. And to me, it was like, whoa, it all of a sudden explained so much that I didn't understand of what was going on, like why the relationship didn't work. And it really gave me a completely different way of like looking at myself and others and understanding, and really took away some of the myths that I used to really think were just fact. Like, for example, that everybody can love in the same way, that everybody has the same capacity for love. And that's not what the science shows. I mean, I would say people can love in different ways, but we don't all have the same capacity for closeness and love. So it's not a matter of like, oh, if that person just loved me more, they would want to be with me. It was like, no, that's what this person is capable of. And it really took a lot of the guilt and feeling of inadequacy away, which was very helpful.
So, Josh, this obviously comes from science and research and psychology, but nowadays it's absolutely everywhere online, and everyone's really getting into it, or so it seems.
Yeah, I think it's a part of a bigger trend where the internet has just made psychology more accessible for everyone. In the past, ideas like attachment theory was something you might have studied at school or university if you studied psychology, or it might be something that your therapist mentioned. But now you can just come across it absolutely everywhere when you're scrolling, particularly after a breakup. I think our algorithms know us better than anyone else in our lives. And if you've gone through a breakup, I think that's when most people discover attachment. And then in comments, there's often debates. So some people will say anxious people require too much reassurance, and ultimately they're the ones that are to blame if a relationship fails. Or others will say that avoidant people just are incapable of love, and they ultimately want to be independent, and so it's unfair of them to date knowing that.
So it becomes part of a bigger, more toxic conversation online.
Especially if you see it as something that's like a fixed identity and it's something that you can't work on. But I think a deeper reason why it's so popular is that it offers an explanation for feelings that can just be really confusing and something that you just struggle to understand. And a lot of people have had the experience of wanting a relationship to work, only for it to fall apart in a way they just can't understand. And attachment for many people puts that into words.
Before finding out about attachment styles, I used to be really sensitive, and I used to dislike myself for being too emotional. I used to always tell myself I'll never get into any other relationship after this one, because whenever I had an issue with my partner, it used to really work me up. Like, I used to get disoriented for the rest of the day, and I used to be very sensitive to changes in facial expressions, even at work. And I'll somehow blame myself for everyone's mood change, or when someone's not feeling happy. People with an anxious attachment style are more likely to misjudge ambiguous social cues as signs of rejection. So I started being more mindful of things like this. Whenever people's expression changed, I remind myself they could be going through anything else. It's likely not my fault, So whenever my needs are not being met, I just rather communicate what I'm going through.
How useful is it for us to know our attachment style?
So it offers a language, and people can use that to communicate how they're feeling to their partner or to friends or a parent. For instance, some people might say, I'm feeling anxious today, I feel like I need a little bit more reassurance from you, or I'm feeling avoidant, I'm sorry, I don't think I'll be able to reply, or I might just need some space. And people are using it to screen partners as well. It might be a bit too much for a first date, but I think there's a trend of people wanting to bring it up, at least initially in the talking stage, because it's useful just to understand who you're talking to, how they sort of work in relationships, and how you can best deal with that. One of the key messages from the researchers I spoke to was that attachment continues to be shaped throughout your life, and it's not just about your childhood.
And what the researchers found more recently is that it's not just like an attachment described it as one category. You're either anxious, avoidant, or secure, and that's how you are. But it's actually not the way that things are, and it's more malleable, and we can have different attachment styles with different people. Maybe about 10% of your attachment style in childhood would actually contribute to your attachment style in adulthood. And then even one recent study in 2026 that just came out actually showed that the maternal effect on the attachment style was 3%, and actually your childhood friendships contributed 11%. So both are not huge, but the childhood friendships contributed 3 times as much as the maternal effect. And that's why I love science so much, because it really helps you maybe separate from some of those notions that we have about, it's because your parents did this and that, that's why you're now in a relationship. And you hear so much of that. But our social brain is so much more malleable, and and it actually takes in information from the environment all the time and changes all the time. And to basically fixate it in childhood, it just doesn't hold water scientifically, and also doesn't do justice to how hopeful and how capable we are.
So Josh, we do love doing these psychological tests and understanding ourselves, and there's a sense of introspection, development, self-growth, really trendy at the moment. Are there any risks of getting overly invested in attachment style theory?
I think the biggest risk is treating attachment as an identity, as something that's fixed and it's something that you can't change. One of the researchers I spoke to said attachment works best as a way to understand patterns and not define yourself. But online, it's easy to see people reducing themselves or others to labels like avoidant or anxious. And the danger is them labels can start to feel limiting. People might think, I'm avoidant, I can never have a healthy relationship, or they're anxious, so this relationship is doomed. But researchers say the reality is much more complicated than that. People can show different attachment styles with different people, and those patterns can change over time. There's also a risk of overanalyzing behavior. Sometimes someone takes too long to reply to a text.
They're avoiding me. They're avoiding me. They don't want me anymore.
It could be because they're just busy, not because they're avoidant. And sometimes a relationship just ends because two people just aren't compatible, and not because of your attachment.
Yeah.
And the idea is that once you understand attachment theory, it can help you sort of make sense of behavior that otherwise feels confusing.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Anna.
And please do keep getting in touch with us. Keep liking, commenting and sharing, because hearing you makes me feel a lot more secure in my attachment style. Well, that's it from me. I'm Hannah. This is What in the World from the BBC World Service, and we'll see you next time.